Hello and welcome to LarpWright. Today I'm going to show you how to make a warm wool tunica like this one. If you have watched my video how to make a Ruana cloak, this is the fabric I didn't use because I wanted to use it for this tunic. It is very similar to the simple linen tunic I made last week. The main difference is the length, including the triangle in here, so I can still freely move in it, and that it's got a collar to keep my neck warm. I tell you, I had a wool tunic similar to this, but it didn't have a collar, and I always had a cold neck, which was very uncomfortable. So this one not only got a collar, but if it gets really cold, I can also close it up in front, so it fits tight around my neck and there's no chance of wind coming in there. So, if this is something that interests you, like and subscribe, and I show you exactly how I made this. Let's start by having a look at my new and improved tunica pattern. So chest piece is very similar, only now I actually took new measurements. Length, this time I took the 100, could have been even a bit longer for me, and I added the triangle, and I also added this collar piece in the top, and this can be a bit longer than the 64, than that calculation I did here. Actually was lucky and could just use a piece of scrap fabric for the collar, and then you will cut it to length during the sewing process, so don't have to worry to get this absolutely right. This is the fabric I'm going to use. It's like a greenish, olive green, 100% wool cloth. And as I said, this is the one I didn't use for my cloak. It's slightly softer to the touch, but generally just as heavy and warm and weatherproof. You could also make this from like a wool blanket, just like the cloak. Try to get a 100% wool blanket, army surplus. You may get lucky and get enough fabric for this project for like 20 bucks. But I bought this of a textile vendor on the internet in Germany, link in the description below if you're interested. And first I had them send me a number of samples so I could make up my mind what fabric I actually wanted to buy. It's like €1 per sample, and I think that is worth the extra cost to get a feel for the fabric and not just see pictures online. So the first step is to cut out the pieces. So I'm transferring the pattern onto the fabric using a 1 meter long ruler and some white tailor's chalk, and I start with the front and back pieces. Generally I try to be as frugal with the fabric as I can, place the pieces clever so I waste as little of the fabric as possible. This time on the back piece I'm cutting out a little round thing there to make And we're at my sewing machine. I've chosen a polyester yarn that is matching the fabric color surprisingly well. And just as with the simple tunic, you can stitch this by hand, but it takes longer. Once again, I am starting with the front and back piece, and I'm sewing them together at the shoulders. And for every seam I do a simple linear stitch, and then I will zigzag with my widest zigzag pattern along the edge of the seam to hem it in to keep it from unraveling. On the shoulder pieces I also sew down the seam onto the back piece with a linear stitch to make it stronger. And now I sew on the collar. I wanted to do this before I sewed on anything else, because I didn't want anything else to get in the way when I figured out how to actually do this. Basically, I just go along the head opening. And it is at this point that I actually cut it to length, because now I know how long it actually needs to be. That done, I hem in the seam all around with a zigzag pattern once more. Now, to make the collar stand better and to have less itchy seam in my neck, I'm also folding the seam holding the collar and the torso pieces together. I fold it down onto the torso pieces, the front and back pieces, and sew it down with a simple line stitch, similar I did at the shoulders. Now I'm hemming in the edges of the collar, and in contrast to the simple tunic, I'm not doing a double fold as I did there, but only a single fold, because this wool fabric is so felted it won't unravel on its own really, so a single fold should be more than good enough, and a double fold will get too thick. So single fold it is, folding it down, rounding off the corners of the collar and stitching it all down, thus hemming this in. The next step you could do later, but I decided to do it now. These are whole center rivets, because I want to close up the collar, the opening in the front with a pull cord. I have to punch some holes, and I have to secure these holes so they don't get pulled wide when using them, when pulling on them. I decided to do this with these brass rivets. So first I'm punching my holes, and I'm using a hole punch that is actually a fair bit smaller than the hole rivets. But since the fabric is slightly flexible, the rivets will still fit in there, will in fact fit in there really tight. Make sure the holes line up, and through these holes I push one piece of the hole rivet and then put on the cap on the back. I'm using this riveting pliers to clamp them shut. And you really have to put a lot of force into it, especially if you are using a super cheap pair of pliers like I am. If I'm continue doing this, I should get a slightly more expensive lever assisted pair of riveting pliers, because this took a lot of strength. Next up, we are sewing on the arms. We're sewing them together like this. Make absolutely sure you're sewing them in the right way, so that all of your seams will be on one side. I have sewn arms on wrong so often, so always make sure. And to center them, I'm folding them in half, and then with my finger put the center point on the shoulder seam, and then just work from there. And after the arm pieces, we are sewing in the squares under the armpits, and we are first sewing in one side. So one side of the square is connected to the arm, one side is connected to the torso, and we will connect the remaining sides when we sew the front and back pieces together. The last two pieces are the triangles that go onto the bottom of the front and back pieces. So just sew it onto one side for now, and we will make the remaining seam when we connect the front and back pieces. Starting at the arm, we are sewing the front and back sides together, and make sure to include the triangle under the arm in the right manner, so all your seams on one side and it's as symmetric as possible. Same for the triangle at the bottom. For some reason, after sewing it all together, the front and back pieces are not the same length, so I'm correcting that here. And now it's time to hem in all the remaining openings. So just do a single fold and a linear stitch to hold it down. And we're doing that at both of the arms and at the bottom of the tunic. Very last step. I'm pulling some leather string through the holes at the head opening, and I'm doing it twice because the first pattern I didn't like, but this finishes the build. So all that's left is trying it on, roll up the sleeves and film the intro. Thanks for watching and goodbye.